And we have the minority caucus, the majority caucus. You have your whip, your deputy whips, same here. We have the Atlanta delegation meeting tomorrow, for example. It's my understanding lunch will be served. And the Fulton delegation, these are well-established groups and caucuses and so forth. And they've been reported for years in most cases. Reported meaning that lobbyists have disclosed any cost of meals, etc. And my goal, and I hope you all will join me, is that in this process, over the next, well, first of all, we're having, like I said, a joint House-Senate meeting on Tuesday at 4 o'clock in room 450. When we go forward, that we can have a final list of what is approved as a caucus, what is approved as a body that can have a sponsored event, etc., and that it be posted and made available, etc. And we're in that process. At this point, I just want to make certain that under this statute that we cover everyone. You know, the road runs both ways, and I want to make sure all the members are covered. I want to make sure that those who sponsor are covered. So that's where we're going with this. For example, Women's Legislative Caucus. It was established 30 years ago. So I was going to say grandfathered, but I think that's grandmothered in this case. But so we have the ones that are very well known and set. I do have a request, and if you will turn into your folders, dated January 27, 2014, from Representative Rusty Kidd. In response to your letter on caucus recognition, as chairperson of the Independent Caucus, I respectfully request the House Committee on Ethics recognize the Independent Caucus. The Independent Caucus meets weekly in the North Anteroom phone booth, but we know of others in the House. Obviously, I talked to Representative Kidd, and Webster's dictionary defines caucus as being more than one, and he understands that. But I did want you to see that one for sure. I also have in your folder, again working with my counterpart in the Senate, a letter from Emily Fisher, who's legal counsel to the Senate Pro Tem, and I think that is very helpful. Again, we're working very close together. As you know, standing committees of each chamber are only allowed one event per year per lobbyist, and I'm looking to make sure, because we don't handle the standing committees, we do handle the caucuses. So I guess I'll throw it open to questions about if you all have any concerns about caucuses, with the understanding our goal is to have a final complete list and on both the House and the Senate side that is readily available to the public and to any sponsors.
I just want to clarify, so current under the law that we passed last year, caucus, that we consider caucus for these purposes would be the majority party, the minority party, and that's it. That's what we have right now. Right. And nothing else. You know, when I look at the list, some of these jump out as, I'll just give an example, the Women's Legislative Caucus, the Georgia Working Families Caucus. They operated for quite some time.
Yeah.
Well, frankly, the Legislative Rural Caucus. When I start to see caucuses comprised of just a county or a city, it starts to feel like sort of an unfair application of it, in the sense that, Cobb, Cab, Gwinnett, if you're a big county, you're good. I don't know, that seems, I'm not sure I would really understand
the need.
well, I don't know, you're so together, but the rationale, and for example, the Georgia Diabetes Caucus, they've done some, they had a bill a year or two, there's folks like-minded. Is it comprised of people who have diabetes, or is it comprised of people who care about diabetes? Well, next year, it would be the Lupus Caucus. And do you have lupus, or do you care about lupus? I'm just bringing up, how do you set some standards and some rationale for that, so that it doesn't not have some serious. And so I don't know where you draw that line, but this is a good list that sort of makes me think of this question.
Well, and this is the first ones. I had so many people who came to me from county delegations, city delegations, saying, my goodness, we've been in existence. Can't we be grandfathered? So I think that's what we need to discuss, how we want to proceed, because, again, my goal is for the citizens of this state to have at their fingertips the information of what is who are the caucuses we have approved and the groups. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a different definition between caucus and delegation?
I would argue that I would hate for us to get into a qualitative determination of the value of a caucus, because I think that becomes a slippery slope no matter who's making the decision. But I do think there are some clear metrics you can use. One would be the size, so having a threshold population of a caucus. I think the second would be looking at the fact that, and Mr. Lerner, correct me if I'm wrong, delegations they have to report who they are. So we have a separate process for identifying our delegations. And because those are operational, the whole point of this is who gets to get together and have a lobbyist show up. If that's our threshold, if we want to recognize any delegation, I think, while I completely agree, I think if you're recognizing delegations as a matter, I think that you use the existing process for evaluating and assessing a delegation, because they have to follow certain rules anyway. And that becomes the standard. And then for any other caucus, I think you set a quantitative number, which is to say, here's a threshold number, because I think the challenge of figuring out the legitimacy of their mission creates a separate set of issues that I think can consume our rule. Would be my concern.
And I would add to that, a delegation can meet now. And you can, so I don't know why a delegation necessarily needs to become caucus.
No.
Because, if I'm the single delegation member from Talaferra County, I don't know, I guess are we mixing two things, delegations and caucuses, all of a sudden?
If I may, just as a point of clarity here, that delegations are not authorized to receive expenditures by lobbyists under this rule. So if I had a delegation meeting and they do not constitute a caucus which has been approved by this committee, then that's not a lobbying expenditure, as an improper expenditure were the lobbyists to providing meals or something
above $700 actually.
Yes, I guess that would be true. But you put yourself, the delegation, at risk there. But you do bring up another question that's probably needs to be considered, is that at some point in time you can parse a lot of these down to a delegation of, as you say, one. I'm the only representative who represents the city of whatever there, so you can parse it down to a delegation of one. And by definition, I don't think that a caucus should be one person. It may be a delegation of one person, quite frankly, under the rules, but I don't think it can consist of a caucus of one person. So that while you may want to recognize all of the delegations as a group, some of them don't meet the numerosity requirements, I think, to be a caucus, and I think you're going down a pretty rough slope, even if you get down to a two-person. I think there probably needs to be some threshold numerosity component that we're going to have to put in. Otherwise, I think you run counter to what this whole law was designed to prevent.
And then, so what makes 4 any more legitimate to be called a caucus than 25? I mean, they can still get together.
Oh.
And you can still meet. You can, bring a brown bag, or you can actually have a lobbyist pay for as long as it's under 75. It'll just be disclosed. When I think of a caucus, I think of a broad group that has issues like that they look at. It's just
Well, any number is necessary or arbitrary. I'll agree with that without question.
And just an aside here, I was not involved in that final draft of that $75 not applying to caucuses, correct?
Right.
I wasn't, because in my opinion, the cap should apply uniformly.
Chairman, so
Yeah.
what we're doing here is designating delegations as caucuses for purposes of the law. I think that's what we're talking about. Is that
It's one of the issues, yeah.
That's one of the issues. Yeah.
just the 3 delegations
Oh, no.
that have applied, or are we doing it for all delegations?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, that was my question, because when I saw and other legislative delegations at the bottom, I was assuming the idea was, what I heard you say was that a bunch of
Grandfather.
delegations came to you saying we should be grandfathered in. Here would be my...
Well, can I
Sure.
but if we do that, they now have status as a caucus, but for purposes of getting together as a group and being disclosed, and a lobbyist paying for that group to eat, you still have to have 2 or more. Is that how we're applying it? 2 more people there?
That's what we're trying to determine.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stacy.
I mean, isn't that the effect of designating them all as caucuses?
If you choose.
I'm not sure I would.
I really think it should be 3 or more, and at least 5. I mean, preferably 5.
So here's a practical question. So let's say you live in a county that starts with a D, and they meet every single Monday, and they meet at lunchtime because the meetings take approximately 7 to 12 hours. This is being recorded. Okay, stop being sarcastic. But as it currently stands, would that caucus, would that delegation be precluded from serving lunch to their members? Or would they be allowed to do so? If a lobbyist offered to provide lunch, would they either be allowed or precluded to have lunch as it currently stands?
My view would be they would be precluded.
They would
The
be
lobbyist
precluded.
person.
They could have lunch. It would be disclosed.
Yeah.
The maximum cap would be $75.
I don't read the law to say that. I read the law to say that they would be precluded from having that lunch.
Really? So if someone went to dinner and there were 3 members of that, say 5 members of the county, they were just friends and they happened to go to dinner and a lot of this paper was under $75, you're saying they couldn't do that?
That was my understanding from this conversation last year. So when we were discussing the inclusion of delegations in the body of this exemption last year, the issue I raised was including delegations, because otherwise your delegations could not meet and have a single lobbyist purchase their meals unless they fell into this exemption that we have embedded in D.
Well, they could disclose each member individually. They just couldn't disclose it as a caucus.
Yeah.
As long as each individual member is $75.
And that may be the way we want to proceed until we have set standards with the Senate.
And that's what I want to say. If that's what we mean, because the urgency that everyone is putting here is that when that question was asked last year during this process, the answer was no, you could not. And so that's why this is why D was put in place. And that's why all the delegations are asking to be grandfathered in, because they assume that they cannot have a group event and have a lobbyist pay for it unless they are in this. So we may not, and that's my point. The plain reading of this versus the anecdotal understanding of it has gotten very confused, as has much of this law on the different levels. So I just think we all need to be clear about what we're saying, and if the answer is that delegations don't have to worry about this, then I think you'll suddenly see that a lot of the issues that we're trying to discern go away. But there hasn't been clarity about that.
Look, back at lunch, say things included. Looks on page 54, D, little 2, clarifying that exempts an expenditure that doesn't exceed $75, period, whether it be groups or not. What was your example of why a group meeting that's not a designated caucus would be precluded from having expenditures above the $75?
She's saying if they're
Right.
if they're designated.
So 4.1 says lobbying expenditure means, and if you go to D, means food, beverages, and registration at group events to which all members of an agency are invited. So delegations, by their nature, invite all of their members to the event. So my reading is that by virtue of this paragraph, you are captured in there. So if you, yes, so page 53. So lobbying expenditure means food, beverages, and registration at group events to which all members of an agency is defined in paragraph are invited. For purposes of the subparagraph, an agency shall also include. So when we had this whole conversation about delegations, it was whether delegations are included as an agency in this. What I hear you saying is that if you read it with G2, as long as they individually disclose each of the attendees at every delegation meeting, who walks in, who gets a lunch, then they should be fine. If that's what we intend, we just need to clarify that, so then that's the practice that people follow, and then you can get out of this. But what delegations are trying to do is trying to avoid having to do that capturing when they have those meetings, because they'd rather be included in the omnibus versus having to do the individualized lobbyist expenditure every single week when they have a lunch. Because otherwise you're going to have disclosure reports where every week the members of this delegation have to report that they were fed lunch by the lobbyist, and that lobbyist has to individually indicate who received that food.
What delegations?
The cab delegation,
Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Well, Atlanta not anymore. Fulton we used to
Fulton.
use. You remember Fulton we do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm comfortable with delegations being disclosed, and if there's a broad caucus, putting them under a different category. Only, it's hard for me to decide what is the number that I'm going to draw that as. 1, 10 is going to be, people who live in Atlanta get it, but, one treated one way, but folks in South Georgia or North Georgia are treated them different.
Well, I joined that. I want.
I'd like to think about it, actually.
Yeah, I want full disclosure.
And I would like this clarified.
Mr. Chairman, can we anticipate the Ethics Commission writing rules to give us guidance on any of this?
I've been waiting and still waiting, and my counterpart in the Senate and I are going to ask that question on Tuesday in the hearing, which of course you're invited to. Yeah.
Ask that question with you, Mr. Chairman.
I know the staff has worked very hard. I know that they retained outside counsel to write these rules, and I'm still waiting.
Yes.
We passed that 143, House Bill 143, at the end of session, signed into law April, May, and it was my hope that they would be ready because we gave them back rulemaking authority, and we expect them to help us, and we help them. We did our part, and we'll continue. I'm in the situation where I said I've chaired this committee for 10 years. I have people coming to me saying, lobbyists, legislators, heads of delegations, etc. Can we do this? Well, one, I'm not allowed to practice law, and number two, if I give an opinion and a rule is made contrary to that, or the Attorney General well, it's too bad that these folks listen to me. They're still in violation. So I'm very anxious to see these.
One thing I think is clear on page 54 at the top is that a rural caucus or women's legislative caucus or working families caucus would have to be approved by the city. So the delegation, I guess that's kind of a separate issue, but caucuses legally are approved.
Mr. Chairman, what you said, if you approve a caucus, you basically have approved no local.
That's correct.
Or anything provided through the caucus is approved.
It would just be disclosed as to a caucus. That, right.
It'd be the whole group.
Women's caucus for lunch. Correct? That's how it would
Correct.
be.
Some of this should be as a practical matter. For example, you go to the rural caucus, there might be 40 people there.
Yeah.
And they're coming, they're going, a third of them don't even meet.
Yeah.
And they're dropping in on their way to another meeting, and it's a practical matter than a discourse. I think that's more the issue. I guess that's how I look at it, it's practical. The women's caucus is like that. They'll come, they'll go. It's more, how are you going to, I just think that's more.
Mr. Chairman, what I would recommend is that for today, if we need to at least approve the existing list, that we set a numeric standard for what is our threshold. I think that we do have to address the issue or clarify the issue of delegations and how, for the purposes of this law, we want to treat delegations, because there really are only a handful of delegations that have the volume that would be taken into account. But my worry is that you will have members who repeatedly show up on an individual disclosure report, and it without the benefit of having of how they explain what their appearance means. Exactly.
Show that.
Or did they eat a cookie and now they are subject, or did they not?
Yeah, they divide it up.
And so I think I understand the goal of the law, but the reality is,
Carol, it's not equal protection of everybody in the group. Just because I'm a large caucus, why should I not have individual accountability for lack of assumption and obvious gifts? That makes no sense to me. I know that may be the only metric we can come up with. How can I be fair to other valid caucuses without? I agree with Norman. I don't know we get into a qualitative analysis either. I'm just stuck. I'm stunned.
That's why I wish they'd kept everything the way I had it before. It worked.
But I don't want to arbitrarily exclude a real valid group of like-minded or thinking people that from a practical standpoint, this is going to be effectively something we just really be the beginning of the end.
there's always the
We've
religious.
set a lot of traps in this there. That's
Right.
not what this ought to be about. It's trapping our members. This ought to be about full disclosure of the public. They have the right to know what we do.
That's
I'm okay with all that. They have the right, whether it be a big caucus or a little caucus or a meeting.
I agree. Any other comment?
It's the end of my rant. Sorry.
No.
Go ahead, man.
I just happened to see someone from the commission. Do you have any thoughts? All right. But you will Tuesday. Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Holly. Well, how do you all want to proceed to get us through the next, till we get to a complete and total review, or do we wait till we have a review of each and every delegation, caucus, et cetera?
I personally would like a day or two to think about it.
Okay, we got it.
There's been a lot of good discussion here, but I don't feel comfortable acting on anything.
That's fine. That's fine. Because, you see that model of the USS Carl Vinson in my office, the aircraft carrier I helped build. We wore buttons in Newport News shipyard, do it right the first time. And I appreciate it. Mr. Whiff, I think we have to do it. Now, my question is, tomorrow, when we have our Atlanta delegation meeting, lunch is going to be provided. Now, I'll pay for mine. But what if others don't? How is it reported?
Well, I will complicate it further because I do believe that you've had caucuses that have met.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That,
I was just thinking that rural caucus has had lunch ever since the secession.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this caucus has had lunch ever since the secession.
I would say at the, I don't know if we can create a safe harbor within this committee that,
Well, but to the extent that they've met already, if we recognize them tomorrow or Monday or Tuesday, it's not any different than recognizing the day. And
that's my point.
and I apologize for not putting more thought into this before this meeting.
No, that's right.
There's been a lot of good issues raised.
Yeah, my point is that we essentially, as a committee, agree that we're creating a safe harbor, that
Yeah.
people are operating, if they provided notice of their...
Well, yeah, I think the law creates a safe harbor, and I think the law says we have to, as a committee, recognize who the recognized caucuses are, and I think we should figure out the way forward on that.
Well, and also, these have been reported.
Right.
That's key. Again, my thing for continue full, open, and immediate disclosure. So these have been disclosed. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, they've been reported individually or by caucus, which we really have not.
By caucus.
So really, technically not under the law. That's a question.
I know. We'll have to go over that and have to work with the commission.
Which is why I'm recommending that in the commission's conversation, they discuss a safe harbor until such time as clarification exists, that there be some,
Yeah, we can do
some
that.
provision for that, because I don't think any of these caucuses were operating out of bad faith, but they were operating without really a clear understanding of what their responsibilities were, and so I don't want that to create a set of harms that we didn't intend.
Yeah, and completely with you, Madam Leader. Again, and just so you know, the Senate, and we want to try to have mirror rules. And I don't know if they finally did it yesterday, but we can work with them on Tuesday. They were going the direction of a caucus had to be at least 3, preferably 5 members, but instead of having Gerald Bryant could have, Gerald Green could have, 8 or 9 different caucuses, being the one rep for each county type thing. So
I will add, I'm not suggesting we go that route, but from a scale standpoint, that would be the equivalent of 9 to 15 in the House. We're about 3 times the number.
so well, the main thing is that we want safe harbor and we want clear definition, and I think safe harbor is as you say. It is. I mean, and the bottom line is how do we make certain that the people of Georgia have full, open, and immediate information? That's the whole purpose. And
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Mr. Leader.
before we adjourn, we promised that I just want to truly hear for consideration anybody that may already have some thoughts on how to delineate these caucuses. So when we're thinking about it, we know what we're thinking about, because I'm frankly stumped. Another 24 hours doesn't do me any good. I'm already at the mental impasse, and that may be my age. Does anybody could I ask you, through you, if anybody on the committee has suggestions for consideration? I promise not to argue with those suggestions. I really would like to just think it through if somebody already has some frequency about it.
Anyone? Go ahead. Representative Buckner.
To me, a caucus and a delegation should be pretty different. And I don't know how to treat the delegation, but when you mentioned the number for delegation, if the Columbus delegation would not meet the criteria at 7 unless we counted the Senate and the House together as a delegation, which is how we meet. But these rules or this law is going to apply to the House. So delegations many times go across and include when we meet, it's the senators and the House members meeting together. So the number becomes even more complicated. So I'm making it worse.
No, we need to know.
And like I'm a member of a one-person delegation, a two-person delegation, a three-person delegation, and a seven-person delegation. So I wouldn't meet any of the numbers at 9 to 15.
The functional equivalent of the Senate
Right.
would be 9 to 15.
Right. Just,
9
which I'm not finding fault with that, but I was just
Yeah.
sitting here thinking of numbers that are real for me. None of ours would fit, which is fine. But then I thought, well, we do always meet with the Senate in every one of our delegations, and then this just applies to House.
And you can still meet. Nothing has to
Right.
change. Just you either pay for your own lunch or you disclose. Nothing precludes you from meeting.
No lobbyist ever pays for our own little Albany County delegation meeting with one.
Right.
Yeah.
And at one point, delegation was in at some iteration, or several iterations of
Yes,
the bill last year.
because we had exactly this
Because we
conversation.
had this conversation.
So the concern would be that if you had a delegation of one or two, that would be one way of getting up under the radar of, I'm taking these 3 delegations out to dinner. They just happen to be delegations of one. I don't know if we're
And
gonna
to Pro Tim's point, it seems a bit unfair that rural community with 1 or 2 members wouldn't have the same treatment as a large.
Most members are good with this, to be honest with you. I really do.
So just know what the rules are. Sure. I mean, that's what we need. We just need to know what are the rules, and so we can, tell me what they are, I'll follow.
Yeah. Well, very grateful. I really, really hope that you all can attend Tuesday's meeting. It's going to be in 450 across the hall at 4 o'clock, our joint meeting with the Senate. And again, we're not going to be what we're going to talk about is more just what the status is of rulemaking with the commission, and what we can expect and how soon we can expect it. And in the meantime, then Jeff and I will work on some things, and I'll meet.
I'll get some input. And
Yeah, if y'all, Madam Leader, with yours, because we need to provide safe harbor, legitimate safe harbor for these folks, and we also need to find the way to make sure that this is fully and completely disclosed. So, anything else?
One way
Yes, sir.
to get that, to finish that thought from the safe harbor standpoint. When something is furnished to a larger group that you're part of by a lobbyist, which is what we're talking about disclosing, and you don't accept it, I don't know, I can't find in the law there's any standard for what constitutes an acceptance to it given one. I use myself as an example. I've got one disclosure against me, and it's a bunch of cookies I didn't ask for, and somebody dropped by my office.
That's another issue.
And we don't have any way of rejecting, I guess, gratuitous, it would be a bailment, for a temporary bailment for some period of time. And if we're going to go ahead and try to clarify some of this stuff where we can all live with these rules, at least in a good faith way, like let's do it comprehensively. To take care of those. If I don't eat that meal, that lobbyist prepares a meal for 30, 10 of us decide we're not going to eat, they're still out 30 meals in a sense. What are they supposed to disclose? It's the cost. And they have to sit there and say, no, you had a tomato, or you didn't, you had a cookie that constituted. I mean, it's that absurd, right? And that's the challenge of this this committee, it's more than just simplistically, it's delineate caucuses and go from there. I think somebody needs to create some operating rules we can all live by and understand.
Well, Mr. Leader, in that regard, for example, the Georgia Dental Association gives every legislator a tie or a scarf.
That's a
That's a promotional item, but they disclose them, which they're not required to do. But they disclosed them.
Right.
And when I found out, I, of course, immediately sent a check to pay for the tie. I mean,
Yeah, that's it.
what I don't understand, if it doesn't have to be disclosed, why they're disclosing it. If it, I mean, and
I just checked, I got these pictures. I hate those kind of pictures.
but that's something on these promotional items that you don't request.
Right.
And if they go to every single member, then they don't have to be disclosed. But when they are disclosed, and all of a sudden we find out they're saying that you took an item worth X dollars, when, that's something that you're right. I really want that clarified, and hopefully the commission can give some direction on how they're going to handle that. And I can appreciate, the GDA and others, an abundance of caution, but that we really need to get this clarified, and we need to know where the commission wants to go with it, which we're looking forward to Tuesday. All righty. Anything else? Thank you all so very much, and again, this is it's a process because we want to do it right.